Hey guys, different view today. So we're back, and for this video we're going to be working on a headlight retrofit on the wagon. On my two other cars, my e53 and my e46 M3 sedan, I've done the NHK G5R xenon projectors, and those are great. But I want to try something a little bit different. I've seen a couple people do these, and the light output looks great, and the retrofit doesn't look too hard. So these are NHK by LEDs. So it has a low beam and a high beam with a shutter system. And so as you can see here, we got the box. I got it from Lightwerks, and I'll put a link in the description for that. Super fast shipping. I mean, they ship the same day that I click the order button, so they have good fulfillment. So these, I don't know if it's a gimmick or not, but they advertise LED and laser lighting system. So this is what we're going to be working on here. We're going to take this out, do a little unboxing here. Looking pretty good. So when you normally get these, they're all bare wires. I paid the $10 option to get these with 9006 connectors on the low beam and the high beam. And really, in retrospect, I shouldn't have done that. It was a waste of $10, so don't do it. 9006 low beam would be fine, but for the high beam on a bi xenon car, I will not be going into the stock high beam wire, because on a bi xenon factory car, the halogen high beam isn't a full-time high beam. It's a flash to pass, meaning you pull back on the stock to flash people, but it doesn't stay on unless you hold it down. It's also your DRLs, if you have DRLs coded in. So if I were to use the high beam connector on the factory headlights, the DRLs, I would have to code them out because they would cause my high beams to stay on the whole time. And also, I would have to do some different coding with flash to pass. I would have to turn that off and turn off the bi xenon coding, which I don't want to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take advantage of the internal wiring of the headlight assembly and use the shutter wiring. The shutter wiring for the solenoid for low beam, high beam has 2 or 3 wires. I can't remember. I'll look when I get in there. And those should go to this. So that the way that it is explained to me is the high beam, even though it has its own plug, internally these projectors, the high beam only works if you have low beam power connected. And so the low beams need to be on, and then you have to turn the high beams on. If you don't have low beam power, then the high beams won't work. So we'll get into that a little bit later. Let me do a little unboxing here, open this up. So these are pretty neat. They actually have the driver for the LED built in, so there's not an external box like some others. So this is a really pretty, beautiful projector system. It's got a little fan on the back that should clear the housing. We'll see when we get it mounted. I also had to order these G5R brackets. So basically these brackets I will install onto the factory headlight assemblies, and then once these are installed, which might require a little trimming, just like with any bracket, then this will bolt to that, no problem. So these right here have 3 LEDs, I believe. A low beam LED, a high beam LED, and additional high beam LED for the high beam, which is this little prism area right here in the top. It's hard to see. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's there. That's the laser part, I believe. So anyways, that's what on this high beam wiring. There's 3 wires for the high beam, power and ground, and then the additional wire for the additional LED for the high beam for brighter hotspot. So we'll go and get this in, keep it clean until I get the headlights out. So we'll come back and I will get the headlights pulled out and start going through the process of getting the brackets installed, showing that, and getting these installed and wiring it up. And then once we get that wired up, we can see how easy or hard this is. But all right, we will be back. All right, so at this time, I've gone ahead and pulled out the headlights from the wagon. All right. So I got these assemblies pulled out. I got the driver's side and the passenger side. This is a driver's side M3 headlight, so it actually has the ballast that comes externally compared to the driver's side where the ballast is mounted to the headlight. My main goal for this is to try to utilize some of this as a pass-through because I really want to keep this piece on the shock tower. I would like to, at least if I could, because I think it looks very empty not being there. But I may simplify it, I may get rid of it, who knows, but that's what I'm going to try. So I'm going to start with working on the passenger side first, since it was the first one I pulled out. I'll come back with when I get everything situated, laid out, and taken apart, so I can point out certain areas, okay? All right, so we'll do an above overhead view of this. One of the first things we're going to take off is the windshield. Not the windshield, but it's like a wind water deflector. These are usually deteriorated, so it's always a good idea to buy these brand new if you can. I bought mine from FCP Euro, and pretty much if they look worn or disgusting, I just get another set and I exchange it with the lifetime return program. So this is my second set I've gone through. This piece over here. Take off the back plate that houses the igniter. We can go ahead and take out the high beam halogen. We will be retaining this. Got to pull out the boot too, the dust boot, because the dust boot keeps the interior of the headlight housing from coming out. Turn this off. I always like to save these because you never know when you might need them for another car. Put them over here. Just a bunch of clips. One thing about the e46 I love is the headlight are easy to pull apart and the lenses are easily replaceable. Unlike the e53 or the facelift e46, they don't come off. This is a brand new lens I got from FCP Euro. It's an AL Bosch lens. So it's the OE replacement. It was a little pricey, but again, I got it through FCP. So this is my second replacement that I've gotten under the exchange program. I'm gonna take out this inner piece right here. Looks like. So I'll use the screwdriver, but you really don't need it. I forgot that on these, they just kind of pull out. They're not going to break anything pulling these out. This is the shroud. Fun fact that these e46 headlights, ZKW, AL, sedan, coupe, pre-facelift, the only difference is the inner shroud and the headlight lens. So if you get a set of sedan facelift or pre-facelift headlight housings, and you want to put them into a coupe or an M3, you can change these out and the headlight lens, and all this stuff will go in. Well, the shape of the housing is exactly the same. I've worked on these headlights a lot, and that's just one of the things I noticed. Real dusty in here. All right, so then for the actual retrofit, we need to pull out this whole assembly from the housing. So this assembly has a few parts in it that hold it together. There's these headlight adjusters. And these headlight adjusters are attached like on this one. There's a little clip. I don't know if you can see it. Right here. And basically it's a circle. And all it does is it attaches on the side here, and it swivels this whole assembly this way for adjustment. And then there's another one in the back that swivels on the bottom. It's a ball socket that makes it pivot this way to go in and out. So at this point, I'm going to take this guy. Basically, I'm just sliding this off the side piece so it pops out. And I slide it carefully so it doesn't break that tab, so this piece is out. The next part is getting behind and getting this ball socket out. There's also the shutter solenoid wiring. We will be reusing these later for the high beam power wire on the LEDs. So for now, we need to unplug it. It's a turquoise. It's a turquoise plug with 3 wires. Just gonna pull that out. This part popped out again. Always try your best not to touch with your bare fingers any of this chrome stuff, the shroud or the reflector bowl, because that stuff is really sensitive to oils and scratches on your fingers. And also, if you try to clean it, sometimes the chrome finish comes off. So always use dust cleaner to clean it, or denatured alcohol on a microfiber towel, very carefully cleaning it. Okay, so I'm going to take this out real quick so you can see. Here, if you look inside there, there's a ball socket right there. There's a little ball and a socket. That needs to be popped out so that we can get the whole headlight assembly and the insert out. That's really all that's holding it in. That little ball socket, some wiring, and this little thing right there. So I'm going to work on getting that. Let me put the camera back up into the overhead position, and we'll be right back. All right. And we may have to cut this video a little short and come back to it because the babies are taking a nap and sleeping right now with the wife. Looks like they are stirring and about to wake up. Yep. We'll see if I can get this ball socket out. There we go. All right, we got it. So the one part I forgot to show you up close was this piece. You'll see right here. If you look right here, there's a snap fitting. You'll be able to get a screwdriver in there and pry it out. And when you pry that out, it comes out of here and this pops forward. And then once that pops forward, you just put a flathead screwdriver in this, widen it a little bit, twist, and then push down and it pops out. So it's one of those, you don't realize how to do it until you actually get in there and start doing it. Again, you saw how moderately pressure I put with everything and it still didn't break or come apart. So there's some give in there. Be careful as always, but you still want to take some care, but know that nothing's going to break just like that. All right, so with that said, I'm going to go up there and take care of the kiddos, and we'll be back for another part when I start getting into all this, okay? All right, nighttime, we're back. Kids are in bed. Let's get started. All right, so last thing we left off is we separated these two, the inner housing assembly from the outer housing assembly. Briefly, what we're going to go over is, if we look in here, there's a few things to go over through, but this goes to the HID bulb, okay? Let's go right here. And then this goes to the igniter. So the igniter is this little black box right there, okay? So this igniter is attached to the HID bulb holder. All right, and if you turn this around, there's two sets of wires that come in. So you have the HID ballast, and the ballast has two inputs: the low beam power from the chassis from the car, and the bi-xenon switch assembly. So the light control module sends a signal for low beam when you turn on the low beams. And then this right here, when you push forward on your control stock, it sends a signal to this, which goes through the ballast, out these wires, and you have two sets of wires. They are red, green, and black, okay? One set of the red, green, and black wires goes to the igniter for the low beam. Okay, basically it's power, all right? The second set of red, green, and black wires goes to this green plug right here, which we unplugged from the projector that's in here. And that was the high beam solenoid. It went right in here. So basically when you push forward on your high beams, power was kept to keep the low beam on, and then it sends a signal and additional power, 12 volt power, to turn the shutter solenoid on, all right? This is important because the bi-xenons, which I'm gonna grab real quick, all right, so basically what we have here is we have our bi-LED projector. Right. It is extremely similar to the HID projector. Right. It has a low beam, power and ground right here. And this power and ground here sends 12 volt power to the low beam. And we're going to grab this from the wiring inside the headlight assembly. With the bi-LED, the low beam needs to stay on, so when you turn the high beam on, this needs to keep powered. And as long as this continues to have 12 volt power, when you add high beam power through this plug, or through these wires, it moves the shutter and turns on an additional LED for the high beam. So you have the low beam LED that's on, the shutter moves, and it powers an additional LED for the high beam that goes into this little prism. They call it the laser area. I got these from Lightwerks, and I chose the $10 option to add 9/6 plugs. If my car was a halogen car, this would have been perfect. It would have been done. But because my car is a bi-xenon car, I didn't need to spend that $10. I could have just left these as bare wires and then just harvested and cut and wired into here. And that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to repurpose these wires in here so that everything's plug and play. So go ahead and put this off to the side for now. All right, so the next thing is we need to separate this stock projector assembly from this area, and then we can work on trying to get the adapter brackets, which were a separate charge, but I got them from Lightwerks. So we have these 2 sets of adapter brackets. It also comes with mounting hardware. All right. So let me get a few tools and I'll be right back. All right, so I wanted to get my bearings straight because it's always some time passes before when I do these retrofits, so I don't do them all the time, so I can't always remember everything. So I needed to pull it apart, and I will show you how I did that. But I need to pull it apart just so I can see how things were going. So basically, what you have here is this is the shroud. Okay, this was actually on the front, and this was the top of it right here. So basically it's sitting like this. If you look here close enough, there's two plastic tabs, one tab here and one tab there. Okay, so these tabs right here basically they grab onto the projector itself. So when the projector is mounted in this housing like this, the projector comes in from the back, just like that. 3 screws are holding it in, and then this guy right here, he goes from the front, and he literally, these little 2 tabs right here, grab these little side things. There's a bunch of them all around, but it only grabs onto 2 of them on each side. So basically when I took those 3 screws out, the projector still wouldn't come out because the shroud is clipped on the front. So as soon as I took a little pick and I reached down in behind the projector and I was able to pop the tab off, and I did that, the shroud fell down, and when the shroud fell down, the projector came out. So one important thing to note is this projector only has 3 bolts holding it on. So we'll go and put it in here. All right, this is the top. It's got 1 bolt here, or 1 screw here, 1 screw here, and 1 screw here. And when you take it off, there are 2 rubber spacers. All right, so you need to keep these. All right, they're important. Keep those rubber spacers. And because they're spaced, because this ear, there's another ear right here. This one doesn't have a spacer. It actually has a plastic shaft that kind of comes up as a plastic spacer that's molded in. So you'll need these spacers for the retrofit bracket. One thing to note is when this projector is in here, it's machined pretty close because each corner of the 3 corners that has screws has little locking corners, so it doesn't twist very much. So when it's screwed in place, there's no rotation. And with that said, it's hard to see on camera, but if you make this piece right here straight, going this way, the projector is actually rotated off center a little bit. So when it's bolted on, it's actually not straight like this. It's rotated a little bit here. And I'm pretty sure that has to do with the fact that the headlight doesn't sit completely straight. The headlight sits at a slight angle. So when you pull this off and you put the retrofit bracket on, the bracket, see here? Let me just double check. The bracket only really goes one way. goes this towards the top, the smaller portion towards the top. And so the bracket is going to require a little trimming. It's not a perfect bracket. The holes do line up, okay? But the problem is these little ears right here, they need to be cut down because they are getting in the way of letting this retrofit bracket sit all the way. This corner doesn't have it. This one does, and this one does. So I'll start by trimming here to get that to clearance for this. And once these two line up and this sits down on top of the little red spacer, then I'll try to get this one on. So we'll go ahead and put this here, try to line it up and see where is it hitting that I need to see. And it looks like it's this tab here, not this tab. So I'm going to try cutting that tab down. Normally I would use like a Dremel, which I do have a Dremel here. It's actually over there on the floor. But this time I'm going to use some snips. Cut this off. It's pretty brittle plastic. Okay, so that ear lines up, this ear lines up. Now this one, this ear doesn't line, it lines up, but it's not sitting downward. It's not sitting flat. So I got to trim this ear. Okay. All right. So now the bracket lines up with all three holes, and it sits flat with the spacers. So now I can go and take these original screws that were here, go and screw them in. Alright, so that's one thing we're going to run into a problem. The screws are now too long because the retrofit bracket is skinny versus the mounting of this, which was a lot thicker. So I'll probably have to make my own spacers for that. So let me go and figure that out. Let me find something and I'll be right back. Alright, so I was able to find some spacers. Basically I found some 10mm bolts. I'm sorry, some 10mm nuts, and put them on the back side, and that took up the extra slack in the threaded screw, since I no longer had this flanged area on the original projector housing for the bracket. All right, so the bracket's installed. So we had to do a little trimming just to get the bracket installed, and we pointed out those areas that needed trimming, little ears. So now that this is on, one of the things you can do is also, one of the screws bottoms out. Don't over tighten it. It's brittle plastic, so just snug it down and stop. The other two are squishable spacers. And the reason they're squishable is because it lets you adjust the pivot point of the corners. So you kind of want them flat. And so there's some give there. And as you're tightening them down, the little spacer will start to squish right there. There's one right there, and the other one right there. And so what you can do is, once you get them tightened down, snug here, and then kind of where you think you want them right here, then you can look at it. You can look at the bracket, and you'll see if the gap is the same all the way around. If the gap is uneven, then just tighten or loosen one of these so that the bracket is level on all four corners, because you want that projector to be sitting flat. You don't want the projector to be off axis. All right, so this is in. If we flip it over, the way the projector is going to work is the projector is actually going to get mounted through the front. here's where we get into some more trimming. So this projector, here, we'll take this other one. This projector has 1, 2, 3, 4 mounting holes on the back. There's actually 5 with a locator pin, but once you put this bracket on, and the studs, the little studs that stick off, go to the holes on the projector bracket. So only 4 line up. Once you see which 4 line up perfectly, that's the one that you use. And you can see here, bracket, that's how the mounting bosses or the mounting studs go to the projector. So this projector is already mounted on the headlight assembly. So that's why, since it's already there, the projector will come through the front and get mounted on there. So now I'm going to show you the problem. These are adapter brackets and retrofit brackets. They don't guarantee that it's going to be perfect. They guarantee that they will adapt and bracket to the projector. It doesn't guarantee that it will fit whatever headlight assembly is in there, because there's no way they can create an adapter bracket that's, you know, broadly generic that can be used for a lot of different things and lots of different cars for the same projector G5 type. So what we're going to see here now is, if we grab this, put this projector through, this cannot reach that because this guy is in the way, this guy is in the way, and because these are in the way, this projector can't shift this way to line up with these two. So once I do that, I'll come back and show you where I clearanced so that you have a good idea of what you'll have to do. All right. Good news was it really wasn't bad at all. So I actually didn't need to Dremel anything off this. Once I kind of held the projector in place and kind of lined things up, I can see where things lined up. 1, 2, 3 of these guys lined up is if I held it up a little bit. And basically this post was getting in the way. This post right here. So what I did was I took and I had to do this on my e53 for the G5R projectors too. So if you look here, I Dremeled off this ear. So this is a mounting hole for the projector. This is a mounting, this and this right here. This right here, this little chunk was just getting in the way. It's still solid, it still holds. It's actually not plastic, it's aluminum. So it's even better that it's not plastic because it's still solid. And this is not going anywhere. Famous last words. So I Dremeled this ear away. And then I test fit and I Dremeled a little bit more until I got like a really good fit. So I'll show you. It actually drops perfectly in place now onto the bracket. So there we go. It's in place, lined up with this one, that one, that one, and that one. See if you can get a little close up there and see. And I took some pictures. I'll put them in here as well in case this doesn't come through visually, but it clearanced it very nicely. So yeah, now that this is clearanced, it's just bolting it in place, doing the wiring, putting the headlight back together and putting it in. So that's what I'm going to get started on now. I'm going to get started on bolting this back into place, and then I'll come back when we want to work on the wiring. Okay, we're back. So onto the wiring portion. For what I've had to do so far, I've had to do a lot of testing before I actually speak and say what you need to do or what you need to try. So I did a lot of testing, a lot of multimetering, trying to figure this out. What I'll start off by saying is the reason for this is being so difficult for me is because I want to keep the OEM bi-xenon functionality, which means I want to keep my halogen high beams in place to use as DRLs, and I want to be able to use the factory halogen, the inner high beam halogen lights, as flash to pass high beam. So when you pull back, it flashes, and when you let go, it turns off. All BMWs have that. You pull back and let go, and it just flashes. That's, you know, flashing somebody to get out of the way, or if there's a cop ahead, whatever. It's what you want to use it for. So I want to keep that functionality. And then on a bi-xenon car, it has a low beam for the ballast, and then for that low beam, it stays on when you engage the high beams by pushing forward. And the low beam is the high beam, but when you push forward on the control stock, the light control module sends a signal to the shutter solenoid on the factory xenon projector, which opens up and drops down the shutter, which enables the high beam, which is still the low beam bulb. And so all it's doing is it's applying 12 volts with a negative trigger to the shutter solenoid to open it up and then close it when you let go of the stock or pull it back. I want to keep that functionality. I also want to keep, you know, the ballasts in the in place, just because it helps seals the headlights. I don't want to have to plug up these cavities on the headlights. And then on the M3, I think it looks ugly when you don't have that ballast on the shock tower, because that's the OEM hardware. So in actuality, I probably could save a lot of time and a lot of effort if I literally just got rid of the ballasts and I plugged in the low beam connector from the LED to the low beam power. And then the high beam, which is the shutter wire on the LEDs, if I just plugged that into the high beam and coded the car for halogen instead of xenon, then it would just work. But I would lose my DRLs and I would lose my flash to pass, because I don't want to flash to pass and have my high beam shutter go like this. I just don't want that. But that would be the fastest and easiest way to go. So for me, I'm trying to use the original wiring. And the way the bi-xenon setup works is when you push the high beam forward, it only works if it detects low beam power, because on this ballast here is a chipset inside here. And when this is plugged into the headlight wiring, which is right here, the circuit board, when it's plugged into here, detects power and current. And when it detects power and current, and you push forward on the high beam, that's these three wires right here, that sends a signal to open up the high beam shutter. If the low beam is off and there's no power here, and this is not getting any power, then these don't work. And that's why if I don't keep this system in place, for me, then I can't just plug the low beam connector of the LED into the low beam of the car, like the chassis plug, and then hijack the wiring for here for the high beam, because it won't work. The signal won't work because it is reliant on power and ground in here. So we'll quickly turn around and I'll show you what I got here, and the route that I chose. So here's the factory ballast, and I opened it up like I showed before. Some of the wiring has cracked for the power wire, so I used liquid electrical tape to protect it, because the sheathing, the plastic could come off. So what I did was, though, I went ahead and I clipped, I only need the power wire and the ground wire coming in from the car. So the car plugs in here and it outputs right here. I only need this side. I don't need the side that goes into the plug that goes into here. I will plug this in, but this will not get power anymore because I cut the power wires that were going to this. And that was, you can see them right there. There's a green wire, a brown wire, and a yellow wire that I cut. And that's going to these two pins. It really doesn't matter though. It goes by yellow and brown and green. So I cut those, so I don't need them anymore. And then I took the factory wiring that was going to this. So this is the igniter. The igniter had 3 pins. I only need 2 of them, power and ground. The middle one is probably some PWM signal or something that raises or lowers voltage depending on load. Don't need that. I only need 12 volt and ground. So I took this out of the headlight housing. It went there originally. I took it out, won't be needed. So the wires that went to that were this plug right here. I clipped it off, don't need it anymore. And I went through my box of wire connectors and harnesses, and I found some 3-pin connectors just to try to be factory. So I got four of them, male and female, 2 male, 2 female. And then the high beam one is right here. I went ahead and left the high beam one right on there, so that way I can kind of have factory connections. So what I've connected that wire. It goes all the way through here, through that harness, and up here. There's a red and green wire that comes through here. I just cut that from going into here, and then I just connected the red and green wire that was going to this directly to this red and the yellow and brown wire. So now when I plug into the car, it's going to apply power and ground to this yellow and this brown wire and the green wire. Remember, the green wire is actually going to the high beam connector, and I didn't change that. That's how it is from the factory. So now we have 12 volt and ground coming in from the car. This right here is the new low beam connector. This is going to get plugged into the LED connector. There's the yellow and the black. I went ahead and put a new connector on it just to kind of be factory, a new 3-pin connector. That way it's going to plug in to this. Then I put another of that same connector on the high beam. I combined the white and yellow wire, which is 12 volt power for the shutter solenoid and 12 volt power for the high beam LED. I combined those two into the 12 volt power. Same thing for the ground. So now I have a 2-pin connector for the power and ground. And that's just going to plug right into this guy, the factory solenoid wiring. So I had to do a whole bunch of splicing because I was doing some testing. Anybody else that does this and my driver's side headlight won't need to do this much cutting and splicing, because now I know what wires go where. So this won't get spliced or cut anymore because it's just going to be there, and I know what wires go where. So this is going to get plugged into there. So once I get everything, I'm going to test it. I'm going to put it over on the car. I'll test it, make sure it works like it's supposed to, and then I'll go ahead and reinstall the ballast to the ballast wiring connector, put it back on the headlight housing, which is on the bottom right here. I'll route the wires back through the headlight housing, route them where they're supposed to go, just like factory. I'll show that too. And that way, in the end, it'll look like a factory headlight, and the connectors will still be plug and play for me if I ever need to remove them or replace them, or revert back to a HID setup if I need to, which I don't think I will. So anyways, I'll be back. I'll show an update with the headlights working, with the high beams working, and my flash to patch still working. All right. While I'm doing the other ballast for the driver's side, I just want to show quickly again a close-up of the wiring, how I'm doing it, just in case it wasn't clear, or I'll just reuse this in place of the other video. But anyways, here's the plug, and you can see from the front of the plug there's 2 large main pins, and then there's 2 smaller pins to the right of that. So basically there's 4 pins or 5 pins total: yellow, brown, and then there's red, black, and green on those. Let me see if I can get a pic right here. So basically you have one of these is power and ground. I can't see from the back, but basically you got these 1, 2, and you got these 3. 1, 2, 3. Those 3 are right there. So all I did was, from the back of it, I clipped them. Power, ground, yellow, brown, and then red, and and then green. I left the black alone because I don't need it, so it doesn't matter. And then as you can see here, this is the yellow. This yellow wire was going to the internal connector that goes to the headlight plug for the car, and here's the brown and green. I basically took the clipped ends and I cut the sheathing back on it. I used these little connectors right here, heat shrink solder crimp connectors, and then I took the two green wires that I clipped from the back, the green and the red. I took them and I cut the wiring back. I twisted them together, and then before twisting them together, I put the heat shrink tubing on one side. Then once they were shrink together, I kind of slid them over it, and then you used a lighter or a heat gun and you heat it up. I heat the blue ends first so that it seals up the sides, and then after the blue is melted, it's got a weatherproof seal, and then when you hit the middle of it, it melts the solder and it shrinks at the same time, making a tight grip around the wire. It shrinks the solder with it, pressing the solder in place on the copper wire strands, and then that's it. You let it cool off. I did it for both. Sorry, it's getting a little close here, it's blurry. So I did it for both. And then once that's done, that's really the only wiring that you have to change on this. It's just those two wires. And then, like I discussed earlier with the high beam shutter, that's in here. This, where is it? Here it is right here. All you're going to be using is this green wire and this red wire. Red wire will go to the high beam 12 volt. Green wire will go to the high beam ground. And that's it. So now that we have the wiring figured out, it's really not that bad. It was much less of a mess on this headlight than the other one because I didn't have to cut a whole bunch of stuff to figure things out. So for you, take the ballast apart, clip those 4 wires, solder these two together, the green and the brown and the red and the yellow. And what that does is it enables you to repurpose this igniter plug here. You're going to cut this off, and you can wire it directly to the low beam LED projector, or you can wire in your own connectors like I did to make it plug and play. Doesn't matter. You don't need the black wire, you just need the green and the red, and that's it. Hope that helps. Alright, so I have the headlight assembly sitting there. I got all the wiring plugged in. I'm going to go turn the low beam on, and then I'm going to turn the high beam on. You'll see the solenoid switch, and then I'll turn the camera over so you can see the light beam on the wall. Alright, so we have low beam. Alright, low beam comes on, and I'm going to push forward just like I would on a bi-xenon car for the high beam. Alright, there goes the high beam shutter. And it has the extra LED turned on as well. Alright, so now I'm going to leave the high beam on. We'll come over here. You can kind of see there is the high beam, and there's a little round hot spot in the middle. That's the extra LED hot spot. So I'll go ahead and do this. Set this up so that you can see what it looks like. I'm going to turn the low beam on again. There's the low beam, high beam. All right. So we have success. I'm happy with that. Down here. All right, so I would call that a win for me in the wiring. What I really wanted to avoid was actually using this, because if this goes bad internally with the circuit board, then your LED just goes out, and that defeats the purpose, or one of the purposes, of upgrading to an LED system. But I did want to repurpose the wiring to keep that OEM look. So now everything will get plugged back in, even though this won't actually get any power anymore. But it'll be sitting there, it'll have this nice weather seal that protects all the wiring and keeps dust and water out of the housing. And that's really ultimately the main thing I'm going for, is to make sure that the housings stay weather sealed. And anytime you start removing stuff, you lose that weather seal protection. You have to reseal it with something else. So I want to keep all that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap everything up. I'm going to get the headlight, start assembling it. I'll come back for a video for that to show me putting the headlight assembly in, showing the wiring, the routing of the wiring, and then showing the completed headlight, and then putting it in so that you can see it turn on while it's assembled. So I'll talk about some other stuff when I come back. All right, thanks. Okay, another day, back to the grind, still the same headlight. We had some success yesterday. We showed how I was successful in getting the bi-xenon functionality, keeping the OEM functionality working by repurposing some of the wire. I've pulled the headlight assembly back out, put it on the table. I have the ballast here with the wiring, and then I just want to kind of briefly go over and show you the routing of the wiring before I actually put it into the headlight, and then I'll show the routing of that wiring in the headlight. Remember, the goal for this, although it's tedious and a little complicated, is that we want to keep this OEM plus. We want the headlight to look unmodified. We want the headlight to function like an unmodified headlight, but have the best possible output of the newer LED generation with a proper projector. So let's go and take a look. All right, so here, let me see, where is the actual ballast? So here, this is the factory ballast. This will still get plugged into here, but it won't actually get power anymore because I clipped the power and ground wire going into it right here. And because I clipped that power and ground wire, right now they're brown and yellow, but right now they're black because I've got them covered in liquid electrical tape because of the sheathing. I didn't have any spare wiring with spare pins to rewire this, so I've used liquid electrical tape on my E53 that had wires just falling apart. Also, this will be sealed inside, so it should be fine. This is the brown wire, which is the ground, and also has the green ground as well. And this is the yellow wire right here for power. So on the factory, on the car, the factory connector for low beam will still plug into here, and the high beam shutter will still plug into here, just like a factory car. All right, so when you turn the headlights on, the power now, instead of going to the ballast through this plug, is going to these two wires right here. So these two wires are connected to here. They kind of go through this little grommet right here. There's two sets of wires, the high beam shutter wire and the low beam igniter wire. I repurposed them. So I cut them, spliced them, used solder crimp connectors, and then liquid electric tape, and it's all gonna go back together in here. So I took these two wires, like I showed before, and they're going to these factory style connectors that I found in a box. And all of these are the same gauge wiring, so I know I'm not going to be causing a load or impedance issue with headlight. That's another thing to make sure when you do this. Don't use wiring that is smaller. All right, keep the same gauge wiring. The silicone wiring looks bigger because of the silicone sheathing, but the actual wire gauge is the same with the copper wire and the white wire that's in here when I compared it and checked. So everything's connected. So we have the low beam connected right here, going to the low beam. Then we have the high beam wires. You have the ground, and then the shutter positive, and the additional LED wire right here. These two get combined into the 12 volt positive. And these wires go to the factory solenoid. The only thing I had to do different on here is I just had to move the pins around. There was a black, this green wire was next to the red, and the black wire was over here. I was able to depin it because these are really easy to depin. Pull it out and just remove the black wire and move the green one over. You can do it however you want. You could do these. I was just trying to match up to these wires right here. This red and green stripe with the brown ground. I didn't choose these wires. They just happened to be in the connector, and I decided to keep them, and they kind of work. So that's all wired up, and that way in the future, I can just disconnect the wiring on the inside if I need to. I'm just trying to keep it all kind of like a factory assembly. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my camera angle and then come back and show me assembling and putting everything back together, okay? All right, back with the overhead view. So I was doing a little bit of cleanup here. I was adding some more electrical liquid tape just to, you know, make sure it's all cleaned up and sealed before I put everything together. I was taping up my connections, making sure I mark everything. I made sure to mark my low beam connectors. So yellow to yellow is low beam, and then this one is high beam since it's not marked. And then before I was, you know, gonna test fit everything, I wanted to put my shroud on. So here's my shroud. This guy right here is the shroud. This goes over. And so I showed before that it has these little 2 fingers, one on each side. And basically it clips onto the factory projector. There's holes on the side that it clips onto. So when you want to pull it off, you have to kind of go behind the projector and kind of use a pick and just pop it out, pop one side out. Once one side's out, the whole thing comes off. But every projector is different. And of course this projector does have holes as well for, it's like a universal fitment, but the holes aren't in the right exact spot. They're clocked incorrectly. And so I don't want to touch it. I don't have any gloves right now. As you can see here, there are holes on the top here. 1, 2, 3, 4. But we need them to be at the 3 o'clock and is it 9 o'clock? Basically 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock position here. And they're not there. So when you put the shroud on, it just comes right off. So what a lot of guys do is they epoxy them on. And that works. I've done that before. On the G5R projectors, HID projectors from NHK, they do have the little holes in the right spot. So I don't know why they didn't do it the same on this. So what I did was I took a Dremel. This housing is plastic, this right here, unlike the back, which is aluminum. So what I did was I took this shroud and I used a yellow paint marker and I painted just the little tabs. Then I slid it on all the way and then I pulled it back off. And I could see the marks where it rested. And that let me know I could use a Dremel, and I Dremeled 2 little holes. There's one right here. Kind of hard to see, I'll point to it. There's one right here. There's the yellow paint marker I got right there. And then there's one, you're not gonna be able to see it, it's on the inside here, but it's on the other side, directly on the other side here. Then I cleaned everything up. There was some plastic shavings on the inside, so I used my blow tool right here. So unlike on a HID projector where you have access to go behind because there's a bulb, you don't have access to the behind because the LED driver is back here. So it's kind of sealed on the back, but there are little holes going around it that you can blow through, and the solenoid area, and you can blow any dust and dirt that's in there to clean up to make sure it's not on the back of the projector. And that's what I did. These are brand new, so there's not really any risk of oil holding on to dirt and dust. So it all blows off pretty easily. Now, when I take my shutter, I take my, what do you call this thing again? The shroud, and I'm gonna put it on. And I can see that one fits. All right, so now my shroud is clipped on because I made 2 new holes. It's centered, it fits in right, it rests on these chrome pegs back here, and it's locked in place. It's not gonna vibrate, and it's not epoxied on in case I ever need to take this back apart and I risk breaking the shroud trying to break the epoxy, or the epoxy vibrating loose. So anyway, that's my little tip and trick that I use. So this thing is ready, once I finish blowing more out, to insert into the housing. So we'll go ahead and blow this a little bit more. Sorry, I know that's loud. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get the housing ready, clean up the inside of the housing, and get this ready for assembly. But before I'm putting this in, I'm going to, get all this reassembled and put back in, and then I'll show you the wiring, what the wiring looks like before I put this in. Because once this is in, it's really hard to see the wiring. But if I install this into the housing and show you the inside of the housing, then you'll be able to see the routing and the wiring and why it makes sense. All right, let's get to putting some stuff back together. So I got my ballast here. I have my ballast wiring harness top. I've clipped the connector back in here. I've tucked all the wires back in. Gonna squeeze it together. Gonna put the screws back in. All right, snug everything down. Make sure that seal is nice and snug. All right, looks unmodified, and that's what I like. We have a ballast, it looks factory. So let's go ahead and move this guy out of the way. Bring this housing over here. Okay, so I believe this is on the bottom, no, this is on the top. And so this grommet right here and this wire gets fished through this hole. Make sure I get the grommet all the way in. Tuck the inside. All right, good. The grommet, sorry, my head was blocking the thing. So I was just pushing the grommet in to get it all the way through. So that's sealed. Then we can go ahead and slide this in. There's like these little hoops you can put these through. All right, that's in. The wiring gets tucked out of the way. Go ahead and put these guys in. This is securing the ballast to the headlight housing. Right, again, you don't want to go too tight because you don't want to snap off these brackets, just snug. Snug is good. So that looks good. Looks like a factory unit. Give you $5 for every time I say that's a factory looking unit. All right, so now we have the inside here. And you can see here comes the wiring, all right? This is the high beam, the low beam, because I have the yellow mark on here. And this is the high beam shutter. So both of these actually were routed behind this guy. So this guy is the headlight adjuster for the automatic and manual headlights. So in a car that has level sensors front and rear, this little rod moves the headlight up and down and pivots it based on the ride height of the car. In my car, I have a manual adjustment knob, so that moves here. But anyway, it's just the same motor, and it goes to this plug back here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove it temporarily so that I can get these wires back in. I removed it earlier so I didn't get the wires out. All right. This guy comes out here. Good. Hopefully you guys can still see my head's not in the way totally. But I'm pretty sure the high beam wire or the low beam wire, let's see, this is high beam, this is low beam. Yep, so we'll go this way. And you can see there's little channels to tuck this wiring into. So it's not like you actually have to see exactly what I'm doing, as long as you get the gist of it. Okay. See if I can tuck that in. There we go. So there I have my solenoid wire towards the bottom, because that's where the solenoid wiring is going to be. And then we have the high beam wiring, so it's all right here on the bottom. So we're going to go ahead and put this back in. So now this stuff is in here, nice and factory routed like it's supposed to be, and nothing moves and chafes or anything like that. Because that's another important thing, is everything gets really hot in a headlight housing. Friction is the enemy when you have heat, and that's what rubs the plastic insulation away. So the less vibration and friction, the better. Okay. Awesome. So the next thing now is to get this guy in here. So again, what we're doing is we're going to clip this guy into here. This guy is attaching to this guy. And then this ball socket right here is going to get snapped into here. So basically, once I get everything in, you give firm pressure right here and you push onto the ball socket and it'll snap. I know it's easier said than done. It's one of those, you say it, but it doesn't actually go that smooth. And I just want to get dust off here. Before I put this together, I'm going to take a quick picture for Instagram. All right. So for now, we're just going to let these wires hang out the back. Let me move this guy. This guy's been bothering me. Sorry, there's a wire hanging down above the camera. It keeps touching my head. so I've got this clip clipped in on the side here. I'm pretty sure that piece is in the top. No, there it goes. It just dropped. All right, so it's snapped into place. So the top is in, the side corner is in. Now I need to do the bottom. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hold with my finger so it doesn't fall out. Look on the bottom and see, yep, that's clipped in there. So the ball socket is lined up. And yep. I'm gonna do firm pressure right here in the middle on this plastic so I'm not touching the chrome. All right, you saw that? Just snapped into place. Double check it. It is in. All right, so here you go. Headlight inner assembly is in. Everything's lined up with the brackets. Projector looks good. Let's flip it around. And as you can see, there we go. So what I'll do is now is I'll come back after I remove the camera and we'll come get a closer look on the inside. I don't know how good it will look, but let's give it a try. All right, let's take a look here. So here's the back of the headlight. You can see that that projector fits really nicely inside this rear cover that's gonna sit here. And there will be lots of space when this rear cover's on here for this unit to breathe. And because everything is internal, I don't need to drill any holes to bring any wires out. If I had done the other way, which you could still do with that if you don't want to get all this complicated wiring, because installing the projector is not the hard part, it's the wiring. So if you want to install the projector, install it. You don't want to worry about the wiring, just wire up this guy to a 9006 connector. Order it from Lightwerks with the 9006 connector. And they'll send it to you. Low beam and a high beam, $10. Cut a hole out, drill a hole in the back cover, and pull these through. And when these are through, just plug them in. Low beam, high beam. And then code your car for halogen. And then you should be good to go. You don't have to worry about all that wiring. You don't, to get all fancy with it. And then you can actually still leave all of this in place if you want. You just won't have DRLs or flash to pass. But that's okay if you don't want to get all into the wiring stuff. But this looks pretty good. Really clean. Turn this guy around here. There we go, that looks good. So let me get everything assembled and we can get it in the car and wire it up and we'll be back. All right, so let's finish assembling this. So real quick, here's a look from the behind. You can see everything is nice and neat and tucked in. Everything's plugged in, wires are zip tied and tucked inside. Nice clean look. So now we're gonna work on assembling the front of it with the inner shroud and the glass. I know it's easy stuff, but it's one of those, if I don't do it, then somebody will be like, why didn't you show that part? So again, got some dust on the shroud. Gonna clean it off. Here's the shroud. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4 clips, and they line up. You can see them in the housing where they line up at. One here, one there, one on the top, and one back there in the corner. So just slide these in. Alright, just snaps into place. And you don't have to do anything weird, it just pushes in, that's it. You don't have to hold anything or bend anything, it just goes in. Oh, I'll take that back. There is one thing you need to do. There's these little tabs on the top. I'm gonna go and pull this back off. There's these little tabs. This needs to go on top of the little tab. Not this tab, but there's a smaller tab right underneath it. So make sure this goes above the tab. There. The others did, that one didn't, so I just had to push that back on. All right, that looks good. Go and get my housing, my headlight lens. I don't like touching the back of the lens. Sorry, I know that's loud. Get this guy on. Make sure everything gets lined up. Okay. Everything looks like it's lined up nicely. Let's go ahead and clean this lens up. All right, for the most part, that's pretty cleaned up. No scratches or mars. Some little bug splatter still I haven't scraped off yet, but there we go. And let's go ahead and put our, so I'll go ahead and put the back covers on, put the halogen headlight back in for the other high beam, and then I'll get started on the other one. And then we'll plug it in, make sure it works, so we'll be back. All right, headlight is in. Let's test it. Everything's wired in using the factory plugs. All right, so as you can see, I have my factory DRL working in the inner halogen headlight because that was untouched. There goes the low beam. Looking very bright, cut off. I'll show it to you in a second. And the high beam. And I still have my flash to pass. All right, let's come over here and take a look. All right. High beam. Flash to pass. DRL. And just for testing, here's my my manual headlight adjustment. All right, using my phone on this one. Got the headlights installed, everything plugged up, everything working, and just wanted to give a quick video showing the final installation and the final operation. So here we go. The headlights are reinstalled, corner lights installed, the headlight trim is installed, everything is plugged in and mounted like it's supposed to. Factory HID ballast is here, even though that ballast isn't actually working. It's just acting as a pass-through for the low beam and high beam, and it keeps that nice factory look. So I like it. I think it would have really annoyed me and bothered me not having this here. But that's just a me thing. I think a lot of people don't actually care and are glad to get rid of that and free up that space. But whatever. And everything is plugged in nicely. Everything looks clean. Come over to this headlight here. Looking good. Everything plugged in like it's supposed to. Looks factory. I need a little counter that shows how many times I say it looks factory. All right, let's go and turn these things on. First of all, let's close this. Have to do the tool check, make sure there's nothing still here so you don't mess something up. Right, let's see. Got my DRLs on. Low beams. High beams. Flash to pass. Let's go take a look at the output. It's got that nice modern look. I really love the color of these LEDs. They look really good. They really emulate that xenon look. See if we can lower that. Over here to this guy. All right, I think that's it. So hopefully this video series was helpful. I know it's a little complicated with the wiring that I did, but I also did clarify, and will clarify again, that you can choose to go the easier route, which is just wiring up the low beams and the high beams to the separate 9006 plugs, and then just be done with it. And the install was super easy of the projector. Notching just one little corner of the projector, and it fit the bracket, and trimming one little plastic piece to fit the adapter bracket. I think I showed that pretty clear in the video. But if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop a comment below and I'll be happy to answer them. All right, have a good one.